changing so radically. We put you into breakout rooms so that you can network with people that perhaps you haven't met before. And that's all, as if you've worked with a swing shift, we're very big on networking and making sure that you make new connections. And then we have accountability and report back. So for those of you who are returning, it's great to see you. And for those of you who are new, welcome. We're really happy to see you here. But enough from me. I am delighted to welcome Colleen O'Brien, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at M12 Ventures. Colleen has had a stellar career. She worked at Microsoft for many years, and she started her career, as she'll tell you, looking at ads in Bing and tagging them for inappropriate content. She has since moved through her career to working as a marketing lead on the Azure product line at Microsoft Philanthropies, and now as the CMO at M12. And she's in a unique position to look at what investors are thinking about as the next generation trends. And so we're very, very fortunate to have her here with us. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Colleen. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, and before I go, because I know at the end some of you need to roll off, make sure for any accountability that you go to our community group on Facebook. If you haven't already, connect with all of us on LinkedIn. Next week, Chelsea Cooper, who's a program manager in Amazon, will be talking about LinkedIn for your job search. And the week following, we're delighted to welcome Keita Williams, who's the founder of Successfully, who'll talk about goal setting and accountability. And now I'm really going to stop sharing.
That is a fantastic lineup. I am a huge fan of Keita Williams, so everyone should definitely dial back in for that session. Are you able to see my screen? Everything's looking good?
Let's see. Great.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone to Horizon Watch. Thank you to Nancy and Sarah for having me back here. And good morning, Swing Shift. Today I'm going to be talking about tech trends that will influence the job market and already have in the past couple of months, and really take a look at the way that it's affecting how we work. Before we dive in, a quick intro. My name is Colleen O'Brien. I live in Seattle, Washington, but originally hail from Woburn, Massachusetts. It's about 10 miles north of Boston. I studied film production in college. So we're talking about tech trends today, but I don't come from a traditional technical background. I did join Microsoft right out of college. I've been here for about 10 years now, and my career at Microsoft has been very storied. As Nancy mentioned, I started on the Bing advertising team. Fresh out of college, it was my first job ever, and I was essentially a human spam bot. I was looking at ads that had gotten flagged in our system for disallowed content and essentially assessing whether or not they could go live on the network. That brings me to my first career lesson that I learned early on, which is get your foot in the door. It was really critical for me to figure out how to get into Microsoft before I could really chart the perfect career for me. After Bing Ads, I was able to MacGyver my way over to the product marketing team. I first started with Outlook.com, formerly Hotmail. We were going through a rebrand at the time, and I started looking at that team because a rebrand means there's a lot of money, a lot of resources. That was an indicator to me that there would be a lot of hiring affiliated with that team. So Outlook.com was my first marketing opportunity. After doing everything from website management to out-of-home ads, like big billboards on highways, I repackaged my my resume and looked across the company and saw, once again, Windows was about to have a really big product launch. Of course, that meant more hiring, great resources to build the next level of my career, so I moved over to the Windows team. While I was working in Windows, I took advantage of this great benefit that Microsoft offers, covering a portion of tuition. I went back to school nights and weekends at the University of Washington to pursue my MBA. And after I graduated from business school, wanted a little bit of a change. So left product marketing and started focusing more on communications. Microsoft has a pretty significant philanthropies organization, and I moved over there for a really short stint, just a couple of months managing our employee giving campaign. Afterwards, really loved communications, really loved that element, and decided to take a big job. I wanted to put that MBA to work. So I moved over to the Azure organization, Microsoft's cloud computing offering, to manage executive education for Jason Zander, the head of Azure at Microsoft. This was my biggest job to date, my most technical job to date. Even as a communications manager, I needed to understand the vocabulary, I needed to understand the product line. So that was one of the biggest challenges in my career to date. After about 18 months, really needed a change. It was such a significant job that was taking over so much of my life that I wanted to shift back into more of a marketing role that was not always on. So again, I looked across the Microsoft organization and set my sights on M12, which is Microsoft's venture fund. And I'll tell you a little bit more about M12 now. We invest in B2B software companies primarily in the Series A through C. We do not make any investments in consumer companies because we don't have a ton of expertise there. We really know that we can best support enterprise software companies. We're writing $2 to $10 million checks for these startups for an equity stake. And we're focused on the set of 5 different sectors: applied AI, business applications, infrastructure like cloud computing infrastructure, security, and then vanguard technologies, really on the cutting edge. Most recently in this sector, we announced an investment in PsiQuantum, which is a quantum computing company. We have 85 active portfolio companies. In addition to my work managing the brand and owned and operated channels for M12, I do get to engage pretty frequently with the portfolio companies that we've invested in, coaching them on their communications, their go-to-market strategy. That's one of the most fun elements of my job. Post-investment, the VCs on my team do stay involved with the organizations that we invest in through board observership or board directorship. And to be honest, working remotely for the past couple of months has not been a really significant shift for us. We're a very global team. About half of us are in San Francisco, Seattle, but then we also have coworkers in London, Tel Aviv, and Bengaluru, India. So we're totally global. Remote work has been a part of our rhythm of the business for a long time. So I haven't experienced a ton of change since that fateful day in March. And then just super quickly, here's what my day looks like. It could be a smattering of any of these bullet points, but just a quick overview here. Whether I am writing a blog, prepping one of the leaders on my team for a press interview, building newsletter content for the venture capitalists that we partner with in Silicon Valley, looking at web analytics, it can be anything and everything in a given day. I'm very much a marketing generalist, which is not a very standard marketing career trajectory. We, at Microsoft, as you advance in your career, you tend to get more focused, hyper-focused on product, audience, industry. I've gone in a bit of the opposite direction in that I've become a bit more of a generalist over time. So something that I want to call out here is, in addition to the incredibly high-tech companies that we're investing in that comprise the content behind many of these channels, I also have to use a ton of technology to do my job, whether it's website analytics software or the blog platform that I'm publishing on, even the newsletter deployment system that we're using. a marketing and communications job is very much influenced by a technology tool set today. And before we jump into the meat of the presentation, I'm hyper goal focused. So I wanted to ground everyone here in what I hope you will walk away from this presentation with. First and foremost, an awareness of tailwind sectors and current trends. As you're looking across the market, a greater awareness of what parts of the economy are doing well right now. Secondarily, an understanding of non-developer jobs in technology. Oftentimes when people start talking about careers in technology, you might think that it's just software engineers, just people coding behind a computer. That is a myth that I will bust by the end of this presentation. And then lastly, I hope that you leave with an appreciation of technology as a new facet of your own job search. So let's dive in. I have my notes here. We're going to talk about tailwind sectors. These are the wind in your sails parts of the industry right now, supercharged industries. And while COVID and the recession is going on right now, there are some parts of the economy that have been relatively unscathed or have even seen a progression in their business. Number one, online education. I'm sure that there are many parents on this call right now. Online education technologies have surged in the past couple of months. On April 2nd, NPR reported that 9 out of every 10 students were out of school. And in fact, we actually have a company in M12's portfolio, Go1, which is a remote learning tool, an online education marketplace. They just raised that 40 million, that first headline there. Online education technology is absolutely surging. The next element here is productivity software. Of course, because kiddos are home, many parents are home as well, who are able to do their jobs remotely. So whether it's collaboration technology, communication technology, all of the above, productivity software is experiencing a surge too. And the assumption is, okay, when this is all over, perhaps might some of this remote work technology, start to trickle off. But as we're seeing with announcements like Twitter's, employees can work from home forever, telecommuting is likely to continue long after the pandemic. Healthcare is a bit of a mixed bag here as the industry goes through this inflection point. But as the massive costs of the industry are becoming clearer, there are huge investments from the venture capital side of the house in new solutions to help digitize more of the healthcare world. And then lastly, automation and digitization. So maybe many of you have experienced this, but industries like event management, insurance, and even finance are digitizing more of their experiences, very much optimizing for remoteness and hands-offness. So automation and digitization across the board. Of course, we cannot talk about tailwind sectors without addressing headwind sectors. These are perhaps a little bit more obvious as our roles as consumers have changed very dramatically over the past couple of months. Travel and hospitality. I think the report in the last month was that there were only 100,000 people on planes from mid-April to mid-May. Travel and hospitality is seeing a very significant decimation. The sharing economy broadly, whether it's Uber or Airbnb or Lyft, they're seeing an incredible downward spiral. And then lastly, entertainment, like large-scale concerts, professional sports. They're having to get very creative about how they reimagine what it's like to experience that entertainment. So, why am I talking about this? You may be wondering, where are the tech trends here? These are just general market trends. But just a reminder, this was a piece published in the Wall Street Journal in 2018. Every company is now a tech company. Technology is so integrated into many of the ways that we work. Technology is such a key component of all of these industries. And software is eating the world. Mark Andreessen is a renowned venture capitalist and has famously said this. Not all tech companies are recession proof. It's really important to consider the industry that your technology is serving as you're thinking about your job search. So now let's look at some of the more specific trends that COVID has introduced in these tailwind and headwind sectors. The first one that's been pretty interesting to me is around contactless payments. So perhaps you've gone to pick up some takeout recently, or have purchased groceries at a smaller market. Many businesses are actually just not accepting cash across the board right now. Venmo has had to increase the limits for its transactions. They had a monthly transaction limit of a couple $1,000s, and because so many people were transacting digitally, they needed to increase what that limit was. In Asia, facial recognition software is now being used as a payment system, a transaction system. So imagine paying for your groceries by having your face scanned. I will say that there's still a ways to go here. You know, my husband uses contactless pay. We went to go pick up some groceries the other day, and while it was great to not have to swipe a card or punch in any PIN number, the end-to-end process isn't complete yet. So while you can pay in a contactless way, you still have to add a tip, for example, by punching a button and writing your name on the screen. So definitely some room for further innovation here. People are shopping a little bit differently now. I loved this infographic on the right. People are buying more food, gifts, accessories, toys, and gardening equipment. They are not buying luggage, cameras, swimwear, traditional travel vacation items. Gym bags, we're not going to the gym anymore. Everyone's doing at-home workouts now. And then store fixtures and displays. Traditional brick and mortar retail is very much plummeting right now. And this item on the left, new delivery mechanisms are being explored as well. So in Sacramento, there is a Silicon Valley-based startup called Neuro, and they were delivering medical supplies from a hospital to a remote medical sports arena that had been converted into a medical facility. And the robots knew to open the door by a gesture. So when a medical professional would give the robot a thumbs up, it would open its doors and they could access all of the medical supplies inside. Of course, keeping things more sterile, contactless, removing as much human interaction as possible until it becomes safer to do so. The next item that's seeing a significant amount of innovation right now is online entertainment. So the first image here is of a TikTok cloud rave. Perhaps many of your children or friends have started their new TikTok accounts. People are getting on and hosting remote concerts for everyone to tune in on their feeds. Yoga and other workout classes are starting to do more online streaming. The transaction payment system for those is not super streamlined just yet. Many yoga instructors will start the class by asking you to consider Venmoing them by the end of class for the session. So again, a lot of innovation opportunity there to make it a more seamless experience. We have Ben Gibbard here. He was doing at-home concerts over YouTube streaming. And then Leslie is an image from a remote book club. individuals are gathering over Zoom, over Microsoft Teams, video conferencing software more generally to connect in the ways they were before. But of course, sitting in front of a camera is not necessarily the most immersive or engaging experience. So there's huge opportunity to think about how do we make this a more engaging experience, a more human experience. As I mentioned, distance learning, I'm sure many of you are managing right now. 9 out of 10 kids on April 2nd were out of school globally. And tools like Google Classroom, Blackboard, Coursera, or Khan Academy are seeing incredible surges across the board. But this is not just for kids in K through 12 or even just college level students. 500,000 people have registered for Yale's The Science of Being Well class. So with less commuting on their hands, fewer engagements to consider, people who are even beyond their schooling years are figuring out how to tap into the greater availability of distance learning and online education. The next item is telehealth. This one is near and dear to my heart. Every Monday, I dial into my remote therapy appointment, and I have been loving it. Not having to commute, having a little bit of critical distance from the healthcare provider just makes me feel actually a little bit better about the session. Frost & Sullivan has suggested a 40% year-over-year growth rate for telehealth through 2025. And telehealth is really beyond just talking to a healthcare provider over your screen. There are mobile medical devices like glucose trackers that are getting distributed right now. We need more secure ways to share patient data, to connect with other doctors, and actually on the floor in hospitals, there's more doctor-to-doctor, peer-to-peer engagement that's happening as well during procedures. So for example, a doctor may consult another specialist during a procedure to make sure they're getting a second opinion before taking action. The next item here, love and romance is getting upended during the pandemic. So Tinder, Bumble, Grindr, all of these online dating apps are now promoting long distance romance. Many dates, several of my friends are dating over FaceTime now, getting used to that new experience. Facebook groups are starting to pop up for singles to organize virtual dates. But beyond that dating market, there's also some innovation that's popping up here for people who are already in relationships. As COVID moved through China more quickly, it was very interesting to see that as people emerged from quarantine, from their lockdowns, the divorce rate skyrocketed. So apps are now invested not only in that initial connection, but also strengthening relationships thereafter. And here are a couple of different apps, Emmy, Love Nudge, things to check out if this is an area of improvement in your life right now. And then lastly, just to touch again on remote work, many people are on the front lines. Their jobs are not possible to do remotely over video chat, but information workers are largely working from home right now. And it's not just the Zooms or the Skypes, the Teams of the world. Virtual meetings is just one component. There's also cloud technologies that all of these applications sit on top of. Voice over internet protocols, virtual private networks, collaboration software. There is so much that needs to get done to make working remotely work even better for us as individuals. Security and privacy have already proven to be an incredible challenge in this space. But as more corporations see that their work staff is able to be productive despite being at home. I think many organizations are considering the overhead costs of having so many people on a campus or in a building. It's much less expensive for individuals to be working at home. So I do think that this will be much more viable and a longer term trend than many are considering right now. Okay, how I've been keeping tabs on all of this. I know that the influx of news can be relatively overwhelming for people, but this is my daily dose. So every day, Cassandra, which is a consumer reporting company, they have a really great newsletter that gets delivered. Cassandra Daily is what it's called. And that's how I've been staying up on more of the consumer trends that are happening during this time. The venture capital fund that I work for is B2B, enterprise focused. So it's a way for me to keep in touch with the consumer world as well. I start the day with the Daily, the New York Times Daily podcast. Of course, most of their content has a COVID spin on it right now, but there's also several business and industry trends that they're diving into. And then at the end of the day, the Journal comes out. It's a podcast in collaboration, or a collaboration between the Wall Street Journal and Gimlet Media. And they're specifically looking at the economy and COVID's effects on the economy over the past couple of months. So all of these resources have been how I have been keeping tabs on what's going on, what are the trends, what to watch out for. Okay, next up, navigating the tech industry. So you're now up on the trends, you're ready to dive in. You know that every company is a tech company, but I sit in Seattle, and here in the Pacific Northwest, there are several tried and true proper technology companies. They are selling technology versus selling something else by way of technology. For example, the cloud computing software of Microsoft or of Amazon, those are technology offerings that they're selling to other companies. The reason why we're specifically going to look at technology companies is that big tech has been thriving during coronavirus. All of the virtual happy hours that you've been dialing into, all of the educational apps that your children have been using, all of those are running on cloud infrastructure. So the Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services, they have been seeing an incredible boom as usage has gone up across the board of all of these ways that we're staying connected online. Let's see. And, maybe you're saying, I'm not a developer, I don't know what cloud computing is, and that is okay, because large tech companies hire more people than just developers. Tech companies are like small cities. And before we dive into some of the specific roles here, I know that many of you are dialing in from across the country, not necessarily here in the greater Seattle area. But if you'll remember a theme from earlier in this presentation, jobs are not specifically going to be tied to geographies in the foreseeable future. There's a strong conviction across the industry that people can get their jobs done remotely. So please do not write off this part of the session, even if you live outside of Puget Sound. There are large tech companies all over the US. But even if my experience has just been tied to Seattle, know that this is not a geo-specific experience. Of course, large tech companies are hiring engineers, the software developers who are coding behind their computers. They're also hiring marketers to talk to the buyers of that technology. They are hiring salespeople to get into rooms and wheel and deal and get the contract signed. They need human resources professionals to ensure that they're hiring and firing and, retention and engagement, learning and development, that all of those elements are cared for, are looked after, are running smoothly. I sit in a business development organization. The professionals there are thinking about partnerships, like who should we be partnering with to make sure that we are reaching the right customers, new customers, bringing in new revenue and profit. They're thinking, in business terms and not in code. And then, of course, we have a really significant legal team as well. And there are lawyers there, but there are also folks who are thinking about government affairs, public affairs. So please, when you're thinking about large technology companies as potential targets for your job search, know that they are small cities. In the greater Seattle area alone, there are over 100,000 jobs that have been created by Microsoft and Amazon alone. So there are a lot of different opportunities out there. Okay, so let's say you've started your job search, you're starting to dig in at one of these gigantic tech companies, but sort of across the board, you've noticed like, hey, it's kind of confusing. Job titles are not necessarily indicative of what the role is, or companies are using job titles for many different roles. It's very important to become familiar and comfortable with this fact as early on in the job searching process as possible. I have done everything on this list: search engine marketing, copywriting, product strategy, data analysis, all in product marketing roles. So my guidance here is to focus less on the role title and really dive into the description of the job and get specific when you're starting to talk to recruiters and hiring managers about what is actually the day-to-day, what does this look like? Because there's not a ton of indication from that role title. Okay, and then once we have that fact in mind, like the role title is not necessarily what the job's going to be, I want to add another element to this. I talk about this as modular thinking. So instead of thinking about titles, I encourage you to think about product, audience, and industry. Maybe you have only ever been a project manager in your life, but if you can go back and say, okay, what types of projects was I working on? In what industry was I working? There are so many different elements and layers of expertise that you can pivot to be more relevant to the roles that are out there. So let's go through a few of these. I think it will make it feel a little bit stickier. If the product is human resources expertise and your audience are technology professionals in the retail industry, perhaps you're providing HR guidance as an HR manager to engineering leaders who maybe build the website for Nordstrom, Nordstrom.com engineering leaders. Maybe your product is retail, your audience are HR managers, and the industry is technology. Maybe you're bringing your retail expertise to the table, creating content, retail readiness videos for learning and development managers at Microsoft, for our Microsoft stores that need to have briefed and prepared individuals to sell our new line of products. And then lastly, still the same three elements, but just shifted a different way. Product is technology, audience is retail, industry is HR. Maybe you're selling project tracking software to the Amazon account management team, specializing in retail, of course, online retail, of an HR consultancy firm. So many different ways to think about the elements of the jobs that you've had in the past. I encourage you to mix them up. I encourage you to think a little bit outside of the box and how you might repackage them in pitching yourself for a role. So I'm getting toward the end of my presentation here, but just to re-ground, my goal was to provide you with and awareness of tailwind sectors, those parts of the economy that are doing very well right now, the parts of the economy where, setting your sights on from a job search perspective are more likely to have roles in the near and longer term future. An understanding of non-developer jobs in technology. Not all technology workers are coding behind a computer. Some are writing patents for technology. Some are creating great advertisements for the Super Bowl about technology. It takes so many different individuals to make technology work. Please do not count yourself out of that group of people. And then lastly, an appreciation for technology as a new facet of your job search. Regardless of what your expertise is right now, there is likely some intersection with technology, whether it's a tool that you need to use to get your job done or a way to sell your services. Do not shy away. There is so much great online learning about different software, different strategies for leveraging technology. It is the heyday of online learning, so please take some time, do some searching, and get up to speed on the most relevant software technology for your preferred industry. And lastly, I will encourage you to do epic shit, to keep in contact, and I wish you the best of luck in your search. With that, I'm going to stop sharing. I am curious if there are any questions. I am happy to take them now.
Colleen, this is Sarah. We did have one in the chat. It was about the job titles. And let's say you're trying to, where do you find these different job titles if you don't have access to the recruiting manager or the hiring manager? How do you know what job titles are associated with those roles within the company?
Yeah, so first, I would say spend some time on the external job boards. There, you'll start to notice some trends. So for example, I know at Microsoft, there are 3 different titles affiliated with marketers. Product marketing managers, integrated marketing managers, and communications managers. You would see all of those externally on a website, and just looking at a couple of different job descriptions, you can start to connect the dots about what is the unique function of each of these titles. Of course, that takes a lot of time and research. So I'd also highly encourage you to make connections inside of the company. Do as much intentional networking as you can that will help you be able to skip that step, to know inherently what those role titles mean. So find those connections who can help you get around that researching process. If you're having trouble making those connections, it will likely just take spending some time on the job search website externally.
I have a question, Colleen. Thanks for showing up today. I really appreciate it. It's great talk.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about trends you see as far as companies that actually do have to have employees in-house. For example, I'm thinking Boeing with jets, and training for retraining a workforce. And is that actually something that is going to be needed, or how are people dealing with that? And do you see a trend in there?
Yeah, I mean, even in the technology industry, my husband works at Facebook Reality Labs. It's a research organization affiliated with Facebook, and half of his job is software, which can be done remotely, but half of it is hardware and requires him to be in a laboratory. So, it's still early days, but some of the steps that it seems like organizations plan to take are rotating, like having different shifts of when individuals will be in the office, keeping in-office staff really restricted to those who need to be there to get their jobs done. And also, in shifting to having as few individuals in the office as possible, also doing some like logistical things, like ensuring that every desk is 6 feet away from the desk next to it, investing incredibly in cleaning services. I see significant thought going into how to make this work, because the livelihoods of many companies rely on it. From a technology perspective, like we are already seeing implications for future hardware releases. So, people get excited about the release of the next iPhone, or the release of the next great noise canceling headphones. But without having individuals in labs and factories thinking about those hardware components, those release dates get pushed out and out and out. And I think that there's only so much time that organizations will allow that to go on before they'll take pretty drastic measures in figuring out how to make it work. Thanks for the question, Mary.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm reading through the group chat right now, but feel free to chime in if you have a question. It's great to see that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. This is Nancy. Colleen, I think one thing that people really wonder about as they're reading this, because I mean, and thank you, this was a wonderful 30,000 foot to 10,000 foot dive of what's out there. I do think that people are thinking about, how do I transfer my skills? I thought your modular thinking slide was very apt. And for those of you who were able to sit in on it, Susie Arnett's presentation a couple weeks back about transitioning your skill set is a great way to start on that. Because you do have to think, I think, Colleen, you're right on the nose as you think about what you're going to do next. You can't just say, I'm going to totally do a 180 and go to the next thing. You've got to say, what is it that I am bringing to the table that other organization is going to be interested in paying me some money for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thinking outside of the box, doing a little brainstorming about repackaging your skill set, even diving into very specifically a single project that you've worked on in the past. I have repackaged very small components of previous roles to pitch myself for present roles. So Nancy, you are spot on. It takes a little bit of modular thinking perhaps, but also going deep on, what is on your resume to that will provide, the perfect swing to the next item.
Right.
The next role.
That's exactly right. And I think at this point, speaking of swinging, Sarah, are we going to put people into breakout rooms so they can do a little networking?
Yes. So Colleen, thank you so much for your time. I think that's it for questions. If you do have any more, go ahead and stick them into the chat and we can get those answered for you. But now we're going to do our networking time. For those that need to leave, we understand, but for those that want to meet some new folks today and connect on LinkedIn, we're going to put you in groups of 4 to 5, and you can share where you're at right now in the job search. If there's any help that you need right now, let them know. And we'll have you guys in there for about 10 minutes or so and make sure you exchange contact information. Okay.
Right.
Colleen,
and as we said up front, I was going to say, if this is Nancy, as I said up front, if you haven't already, join our community group on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn, right? We want to make sure that we all stay in contact. Colleen, thank you again. I hope you all stay well and stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, you should be getting those breakout room notifications right now. Thanks, everyone.